Court is in session and calls number 321394. The case is styled as State of Texas versus Charles Wade Ellis. Let the record reflect that Charles Wade Ellis is present in court with his attorney, Attorney Keith Ellis. State is present with Assistant District Attorney Tommy Coleman. Prior to the court calling this case for trial, the state and the defense filed a joint motion to waive the jury. Mr. Coleman, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
And Mr. Ellis, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. So, and the court signed that motion. And so today we're here for a bench trial in this case. Now, at this time, we will ask that Mr. Chase Wade Ellis please stand so that the state can present the information.
In the name and by the authority of the state of Texas, comes now the undersigned Assistant Criminal District Attorney of Jefferson County, Texas, on behalf of the state of Texas, and presents in and to the county court at law of Jefferson County, Texas, that in Jefferson County, Texas, Chase Wade Ellis, hereinafter styled the defendant, heretofore on or about November the 14th of 2018, did then and there intentionally and knowingly hunt a wildlife resource on private property without the owner, Patrick H. Fillion's consent, against the peace and dignity of the state.
Mr. Chase Wade Ellis, how do you plead? Not guilty, guilty, or no contest?
Not guilty.
Okay, you may be seated. State, would you like to make an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor. Very briefly, Judge. This case is a case that arises under section 61.022 of the Texas Parks and Wildlife Code. It's titled Taking Wildlife Resources Without Consent of the landowner, and it is punishable by a fine of no less than $500 or more than $4,000, and also confinement in jail of up to a year, Judge. Not unlike your typical Class A misdemeanor. I believe the testimony in this case will show that back in November of 2018, Mr. Phelan here was hunting on his family land. And as he was when he wrapped up that day and was making his way off the land, he encountered the defendant. Initially, the defendant, he saw a truck, a vehicle that he did not recognize, and he went over to inspect the vehicle, and he would eventually see a figure, a subject, initially some 85 yards or so away, and then eventually this individual would make his way closer, 40, 50 yards away, and then there were some words exchanged. The defendant would eventually become close as I am to Mr. Phelan now, and Mr. Phelan will testify that it was at that point that he was able to visually identify this defendant. Even more than visually identifying this defendant, Mr. Phelan will testify that he asked, "Who are you?" And after some back and forth and some choice words, the defendant would eventually identify himself as Chase Ellis, Judge. Mr. Phelan would indicate that he was calling the game warden, and at that point, this defendant would hop into that vehicle or that truck and drive away hastily, nearly causing Mr. Phelan to have to take evasive action, jump out of the way of the truck before being struck by that truck. Mr. Phelan will also testify that he observed the defendant to be wearing full camo with binoculars. And he'll say that in his opinion, that this defendant was there hunting deer. Even more than what he observed him to be wearing, he would also find a rifle shortly after the defendant left. A rifle leaning against a tree that was in the area of where he initially observed this defendant to be, further lending to his opinion or the notion that he was there hunting, hunting deer more specifically on that property. Mr. Phelan, that is his family's property. He can testify to the fact that no one in his family, certainly not Mr. Phelan himself, but no one that he's aware of in his family gave this defendant permission to be there on that property. Judge, at the conclusion of this case, I think the evidence will be clear that this defendant committed that offense violating chapter 61.022 of the Texas Parks and Wildlife Code, hunting without the consent of the landowner. And based on Mr. Phelan's testimony, based on his observations that day, based on his eyewitness identification of this defendant, will be asking the court to find the defendant guilty of this offense. Thank you, Judge.
And Mr. Ellis, you'd like to make an opening statement or you'd like to reserve?
Judge, I'd reserve it till our case in chief starts,
Okay,
till after the state arrest.
okay. There's somebody,
Yeah, Judge, I was going to wait until he was done. I'll invoke the rule at this point.
you invoke the rule?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if we have anybody here who, other than the defendant, who's a witness, the rule has been invoked. And since the rule has been invoked, that just simply means that you're ordered to leave the inside of the courtroom and do not enter unless instructed to do so by the bailiff or me. You are not to discuss this case or your testimony with other witnesses or anyone else except the attorneys. You are not to read any report or comment on the testimony, evidence in this case. Any witness violating this instruction is subject to being held in contempt of court. As we have any witnesses in the courtroom?
None in the courtroom, Your Honor. So,
Okay,
Judge.
okay. So at this time, you said you're gonna reserve your opening, is that correct,
Yes,
Mr. Ellis? Mr. Coleman, you'd like to proceed?
Yes, Your
You
Honor.
can call your first witness.
This time, Your Honor, the state calls Anthony McDade Phelan.
Okay, Mr. Phelan, would you please raise your right hand? Mr. Phelan, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? You may put your hand up. Mr. Phelan, you can have a seat in the witness stand. And you can adjust the mic. Mr. Coleman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you prefer me question the witness from?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Phelan. Could you please state your full name for the report?
Anthony McDade Phelan.
And you also go by Mickey Phelan?
That's what I typically do mine.
And where do you reside, Mr. Phelan?
Beaumont.
And how long have you resided in Beaumont?
Off and on for the whole 35 years of my life.
And what do you do for a living?
Sales,
What type of sales?
industrial sales.
Okay. And I'd like to take you back to November the 14th of 2018. What activities or activity were you engaged in back on that day?
That evening I was bow hunting for deer on some of our property right there on Walden.
Okay. Would that be property located at Walden and Major?
Yes, sir.
Is that property located in Jefferson County, Texas?
Yes, sir.
The property, is that a family property?
Family property.
How long were you out there hunting approximately?
Probably 4 hours.
Later in the day or earlier in the day?
I got out there mid-afternoon and left right about sunset.
So the sun was setting, what, if anything, what were you doing when you wrecked it?
I was walking out of the property back to the entrance of the property, the entrance gate.
Did anything catch your attention?
Yeah, so there's a canal that splits the property in two, or just a drainage ditch. holds water in big floods, but really doesn't hold water. And there's gates on either side of it. And as I was walking out, I had a friend who had dropped me off to hunt. So I didn't have a car there, and I was waiting on him to pick me up. And I noticed a truck on the other side at the other gate. So I've been stopped and by game wardens numerous times there. That's no big deal. And at first, that's what I figured it was, the game warden like this truck. But then I thought it was a little weird because my truck wasn't there. So then as I got closer, I noticed it wasn't a game warden vehicle. So I walked up to it and figured maybe somebody just left their truck there, had car problems, and I started looking at it.
And while you were inspecting the truck, what if anything happened, or what happened with the truck? What did the truck do?
As I was sitting there looking at the truck waiting to be picked up, the lights were flickering on and off like somebody was hitting the key fob to open the door, and I wasn't really sure what was going on there.
At some point, did someone appear?
Yes, as I was standing there, I looked further down the ditch line, and there was a big pine tree that's been there for years, and it was still dusk enough where I could make out a figure standing that way. And I was on the phone with someone at the time, and so I think I see someone down there. I'm gonna have to call you back. And I kept staring at it and was making sure my eyes weren't really playing tricks on me. But then I was like, no, it's definitely a person. And then I hollered at them, and then they started making their way towards me. And then they kept getting closer, and then I hollered at them again, asking who they were, and then they asked who I was.
So you asked this individual who they were, and they weren't initially, they didn't initially identify themselves, correct?
No, they just kept walking and then asked who I was after I'd asked a couple times who they were.
And did you make it clear to this person that you were, well, who did you tell this person that you?
I told the person my name, and then my family owned the property, and I asked who they were, and then what they thought they were doing out on the property.
And what was his response?
He asked, I believe he asked if we owned the ditch line as well. And that didn't really make sense to me, because the DD6 just has an easement through our property. And
I'm sorry, I want to make sure the judge caught that, because the DD6 has what?
an easement through our property.
Okay, and the DD6 meaning the drainage
The
district.
drainage district. And on top of that, when I had walked out, I would have seen him if he was standing on the ditch line as well. He must have been around the corner further into the property and then walked out.
So just so we're clear, you've got the property that your family owns, the drainage district has an easement going through that property,
North to south.
north to south. And when you encountered this defendant, he was on the property, correct?
Yeah.
You have to go through the property to get to it?
You have to cross their gate, yeah.
All right, so makes his way closer. He didn't initially identify himself. And then what happens?
Then he kept getting closer, and at that point I noticed that he was wearing camo, full camo, and had binoculars around his neck. And I asked him, who he was, and he wasn't saying who he was. And I asked him what the hell are you doing out here? And he said, I'm just walking around looking at deer. And I said, no. I was like, I asked him if you're making a habit of walking around a property that's not your own. And he said, well, I have permission. I got it from, and then he asked me if I know Michelle McKinley. And I said, yeah, I know Michelle McKinley. He goes, well, Shane, her son, gave me permission. He said that he comes out here and hunts all the time. And I said, well, first off, I don't believe that. Secondly, Shane has no right to give anybody permission out here.
And just to be clear, does either Michelle McKinley or her son Shane have any authority as it relates to that property to grant people permission? Are you related to Shane or Michelle McKinley?
No.
Now let's talk about the camo. When you say he was wearing full camo, just to make sure the judge understands what you mean by that. What is that? Full camo, what, from head to toe, or
Camo shirt, camo pants, and then you just have binoculars around his back.
is that, attire that you usually associate with someone who's hunting?
Yeah.
Um, Now, eventually, did he tell you his name?
Yeah, so then we kept going on and, I asked him who he was. And finally he said Chase Ellis, and that clicked. You know, I knew that at one point, Michelle and I met, Keith, Mr. Ellis, a couple times with Michelle. And I knew that he had a son, and I put those two and two together, and I recognized him through social media pictures that I've seen shared and stuff like that. And, that's why I clicked.
Just to be clear, I mean, you know of Michelle McKinney, correct?
I know Michelle.
You know Michelle McKinney, but she's not a person with the authority to grant somebody permission to go in.
No, absolutely not.
Now, we started out, he was some 85 yards away, and he gets closer, 40 to 50 yards away. Eventually, demonstrate to the judge. In fact, Judge, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
Tell me to stop when I get as close to you as he eventually got to you that day.
If not closer.
So just for the purposes of the record, about how far away are you and I in terms of feet or inches?
3 feet, maybe.
So to say you were close enough that you could identify the person that you encountered that day on your property on November 14th, 2018.
Absolutely.
Do you see the person in the courtroom today that you encountered on your property back on November 14th of 2018, who eventually told you he was Chase Ellis? Could you please point to him and identify him by an article of clothing that he is wearing?
Right there in the blue plaid shirt.
Your Honor, I'd ask that the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant.
The record will so reflect the witnesses identified the defendant.
Was the defendant armed at the time? Or that you could tell?
No, just binoculars. And I actually asked him several times, you know, I had a feeling that he was out there hunting. It's not the first time I've run in with people that have been out there hunting and trespassing on the property. And I told him, I was like, look, man, you have a bow, you have a gun out here, where is it? Just tell me where it is. We'll all go over a lot easier. Like, well, you know, it'll be easier. And he kept saying, I don't have anything. I said, I know you're lying to me. You're not out here just walking around full camo looking at deer. And at the time, I told him, because I was getting no headway with him telling me where the gun or the bow that he had was. I said, well, I guess we'll let the game warden decide that. And I was bluffing with him and told him that I called the game warden. I hadn't actually been called the game warden at that point. And when I said that, his tone really increased. He got pretty angry. He said, you called the game warden, why would you do that? And he said, fuck this bullshit. I'm not waiting around and getting in trouble for some bullshit I didn't do.
What did he do next?
He went around me and then went towards his car or the truck that he was driving. So I went, grabbed my cell phone because I was going to video his license plate. So I went to step in front of his car. He turned the truck on to go to leave. I was trying to click the record button, and my iPhone, I guess, wasn't recording in time. I have the tail lights of him driving away, and you can see the license plate, but it's blurred. And
Let's go back a little bit, kind of unpack that some. So, but you're in the process of trying to video that license plate. What did he do?
he
What
hits
actually
the
did he do?
gas, and I jump out of the way so I don't get hit by the car.
Did you eventually contact the game warden?
Immediately after that.
Did they conduct an investigation?
Mike Boone asked me, who's no longer a game warden actually, he asked me to go walk down. I explained the entire situation. He asked me to walk down and walk to the area where I had originally seen him.
I object to hearsay with what Mr. Murphy and I said.
Objection sustained.
I'll move on. Without saying what game warden Boone said to you, did he conduct some form of an investigation?
Yes,
Did you eventually walk down that same day not long after the defendant left the area, did you walk down to the area where you saw him initially observed him?
I did.
What, if anything, did you find?
I found a Ruger hunting rifle, fully loaded, leaned up against the tree where I saw the figure standing. That ended up being.
Now this rifle, this Ruger, did it appear to be rusty, or
It appeared to have been set down there that same day.
it didn't appear to have been, at least in your opinion, been there for any substantial length of time?
No.
In fact, did you photograph or videotape that
Yeah.
that discovery?
Yeah, I did.
What did you use to do that? Your cell phone? Your cell phone, have you found it to be capable of making accurate recordings?
Yeah.
You yourself, you're capable of properly operating that cell phone, in other words, making it take video recording?
Yeah, but obviously not fast enough to get his license plate properly.
But at least as it relates to video and the rifle that you found, you were able to properly operate, all right?
Yeah.
The video that it took, was it a fair and accurate video?
Yeah.
Did you bring your cell phone with you today?
Yeah.
Can you pull up that video, please?
Sure.
May I first word instruction?
Yes, you may.
Just for purposes of the record, I am tendering to defense counsel, the video here, which I just became aware of about an hour ago. Tendering to him for his inspection.
Okay.
We have an operator. Yes, sir. Mr. Field, can you cue this thing up at the very beginning and maybe pause it and show me how I can get it to play? Did you see it play?
Yeah.
Okay. And about how long is this? Like a 30 second?
30 seconds.
Okay. This is the beginning here. Not asking necessarily have a way of marking, but I'd have to be able to publish it to the court. To the court to do it.
Mr. Ellis, do you have any objections?
No objection.
Okay. For
Purposes of the record, I am tendering to the court the cell phone of the witness, Mr. Phelan, for the court to view the short video there. I believe you just hit that play button there, Judge. Thank you, Mr. Phelan. Did you learn who the owner of that rifle was or is?
Yes, through when Mike Boone did the investigation.
Who is the owner of that rifle?
He was, well, yeah, Keith that was.
The rifle, was it loaded or unloaded?
But
Just to be clear, you and your family are the owners of that property.
Yes.
You didn't give the defendant consent to be there, correct?
No.
And to your knowledge, no one in your family gave the defendant consent to be on that property.
Yes.
Did you form an opinion about what, if anything, this defendant was out there doing with it?
Here,
And what do you base that opinion on?
he was dressed in full camouflage, and I found his loaded deer rifle.
Is there anything else that you want this court to know?
Off the top of my head, not that I can think of.
Judge, I'll pass it.
Okay. All right. Mr. Ellis,
There's other circumstances, I don't have a problem with Mr. Ellis.
you want to do it from there
Yes.
with your condition? Yeah, do we need to move that table
I can see it.
a little bit? Okay, that's fine. Hey, Mr. Ellis, the witness is yours.
Mr. Freeland, you indicated that you hunted that afternoon and you had been there about 4 hours, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
What time do you think? You said sunset, you know, the time that it may have been whenever you got was you hunting in a deer stand?
I was hunting in a trap.
And you know about what time you got out of the stand?
Probably 5:45.
And whenever you say it was around sunset, was it still daylight enough for you to see animals if they had come out at that time?
Yeah.
So you normally cut your hunts short. So if you'd have saw a deer or whatever you was hunting come out at that time, you cut your hunt short to come out of the stand.
I cut my hunt short plenty of times if I'm not seeing anything, or if mosquitoes are eating me up, or anything like that.
Had you seen any deer that day?
I have not.
So it's still light enough to see to walk out.
Yes.
Now, as you're walking down the canal toward where I assume, I think you said your friend dropped you off?
Yes.
And did he drop you off there where the truck was parked?
He dropped me off on the truck was parked at the west gate. He dropped me off at the east gate.
Okay, so if the truck would have been parked there at the time you went hunting, you wouldn't have it, you wouldn't have known that, correct?
If the truck had been parked.
Parked where it was at the west gate.
No, I would have 100. The gates are 10 yards apart from each other.
Okay, so
They're split by the ditch.
was the truck parked there whenever you went hunting?
No.
And so it had, whoever was in that truck had to pull up to that location sometime after you went in, sometime in that 4 hours, correct? Okay, did you hear anything of the truck pulling up, the door shutting, anything of that nature to know
Well,
about what time they got?
The properties that Major and Walden, all you hear is vehicles driving up and down that.
But what about the door shutting?
No, not that it would have stood out to me.
So when you came out of your stand and walking toward where your friend I assume was going to pick you up,
Yes, sir.
you had no knowledge of anyone else being there.
On the property now.
Now, how far down the property from where you was hunting was the entrance to that piece of property where that truck was parked?
How far from where I was hunting
Yes,
was where the truck was parked?
yes.
It was around the corner. And as a crow flies or in a
Well, the question is probably not a real good, I didn't word the question right. Could you have, when you got out of your stand, got there on the canal walking out, could you see the truck?
Yeah.
Okay, so you could visually see the truck from where you was hunting,
No, not from.
not where you was sitting, but after you got out on the canal, is that
Yeah.
correct? Okay, and I think you indicated that you thought it may be the game warden, or you didn't have any knowledge who it was.
I assumed that if it was anybody, it was probably the game warden, because anybody ever really parks there. It's not a place that someone would break down and just park. It's not, Walden Road in that area is not a very major road.
That brings me to a question, of what kind of, markings did you have, does your family have on the property to show that someone would be trespassing if they went on there?
Some of our markings, we have no trespassing signs. Some of them have purple spray paint.
Isn't it true that at that day that this incident happened, there was no purple paint?
I'm not actually sure on that.
Well, in Mr. Boone's report, he put that whoever violated,
Objection, Judge. I think hearsay goes both ways.
Objection.
To hearsay about what Mr. Boone told this witness, he can't use Mr. Boone's report. Mr. Boone's possible.
so Judge, am I correct in Mr. Boone's report's not admissible in the court? The court can't take judicial notice.
Mr.
of
Boone
his
is,
report that was in discovery?
well, Mr. Boone is not here. You asking him to testify to something that was in Mr. Boone's report. That would be hearsay.
Your Honor, I'm sorry, I just thought that since that was part of discovery and his report was part of the file, that it would be admissible.
No, that's, no, his objection is sustained as hearsay.
Yes, sir. Now, as you're walking down the canal, walking out, is there, I'm trying to get a picture in my mind, there's a canal, there's an edge of the canal, as you walk down, it's enough territory for you to be able to walk down the canal, is that correct? Or beside the canal?
Yeah.
What
On
about,
each side, it's mowed on each side, probably 10 to 15 yards on each side. It's mowed where there's not thick trees. And in the middle of the 10 to 15 yards on each side, there's a drainage ditch. The drainage ditch does not hold water unless it's heavy flow.
so from the edge of the canal that we're talking about, I think it's a drainage district canal. It's about 10 or 15, or actually, yeah, you said 10 or 15 yards on each side of the canal. It's mowed. Okay, so you're walking down the edge of the canal on that 10 or 15 yards toward the truck. You see the truck, but you don't see anyone there.
No.
Is it starting to get dark?
It is starting to get dark.
Is it fairly dark at that time?
Yeah, I can see enough that I can see that there's a figure standing out in the pine tree.
Yeah, but you couldn't tell who it was, man, woman.
No, I can tell it was a figure.
And as you walk out, then they walk out, it's steadily getting darker. And what I'm getting at, Mr. Speedland, is whenever you and whomever was there came in contact with each other, it was fairly dark at that point, correct? But
Correct.
y'all came real close.
Very close.
And did you have a flashlight to shine to see that person?
No.
Okay, so you're talking to him as it was getting dark, you're talking to him face to face.
Sure.
And your testimony we heard as to what happened. Could you recognize this person that was there as Chase Ellis whenever he walked up?
Not whenever he walked up. I knew that I recognized his face from somewhere. And not until he told me his name, well, until he mentioned Michelle and Shane, and then he finally told me that his name was Chase Ellis, that I put two and two together.
So how well have you ever been out in public with Chase Ellis?
Not that I'm aware of.
Have you ever had a conversation anywhere with Chase Ellis before this day?
No.
So whenever you say you recognized him from social media, what are you referring to?
Just Facebook pictures or stuff like that, pictures that have been shown. And I actually, after he told me his name, I called a friend that we deer hunt together, and I told him about this, what happened, and then he ends up.
All right, here's.
Well, since he asked the question, he opened the door to the hearsay.
No, he still can't, it's objection sustained. If you can't testify to what somebody told you.
Okay, so he sent me a picture of the person. It's Chase Ellis. That was the same person I had to fix.
Was that at that night or that evening?
That
He
was
sent you, well, later on that night or after the.
within an hour of seeing him.
Had you said you saw Chase Ellis on social media through pictures and things, you recall what the pictures are of?
Yeah,
You just know now that that was definitely Chase Ellis.
after I was sent the picture that evening as well, yes. I'd seen the person less than an hour before that.
Could you seen the person less than an hour before what?
I had the picture sent to me.
Okay. And so in your mind, you knew that was Chase Ellis.
In my mind, I knew that was Chase Ellis because the person told me their name was Chase Ellis, and then I saw a picture associated with the name Chase Ellis that was the exact same person I'd seen an hour before.
If someone is to testify or was to testify, well, I'll be back. So with your looking on social media and whoever you came in contact with saying, I'm Chase Ellis, is there a possibility that that person out there that you came in contact with, is there a possibility that that could be someone else using Chase's name?
Whoever I came in contact with that
Yeah.
way? No,
So it's no possibility
No.
while you're standing there in the dark.
no.
He walks up, he says, you ask who he is, he said, I'm Chase Ellis.
No, he didn't immediately say it that soon. I had to ask several times.
Well, he told you that it was Chase Ellis.
Eventually told me his name was Chase Ellis.
And how long before this incident had you saw pictures of Chase Ellis on the social media, internet or
Oh, it's
Facebook?
probably over a year or two. I mean, not since I've seen a picture, but I've been seeing pictures for a year or two.
Have you seen Chase Ellis on the internet since then?
Not since that picture was sent to me that night.
Okay, so Chase Ellis, you saw pictures of him on social media before that night, but since this has been some 4 years ago, since then, you've not seen any pictures of Chase Ellis on social media that you can recall. At the time you went to the vehicle that was parked there, and you said your phone didn't record, but it recorded a few minutes later whenever you just.
Well, my phone recorded as the truck was pulling away. I have that video as well, but you just can't really tell the license plate.
So you don't have the license plate number?
No.
Well, what reason would you have, or how did you know what number to call in order to get the game warden?
We own a decent amount of family property, so I'm actually in contact with the game warden relatively often.
Is he the game warden that's for that area?
Mike is not.
No, so in fact, his area that Mr. Boone covers is a different area than that, which is on that day, correct? And you called Mr. Boone for what reason?
Because he's the game warden that I'm most familiar with.
Okay, so it's just, or would you call you and Mr. Boone somewhat of friends?
We're friendly. We've never done anything socially together, but we see each other when he's out checking and we have a conversation, catch up, see how each other are doing.
Had you ever testified for Mr. Boone in any other cases?
And I gave my statement in the whooping crane case.
Objection, Judge. I just want, the question seemed a little confusing and perhaps misleading to say that he quote unquote testify for Mr. Boone.
What's your objection?
My objection is it's a misleading question, it's confusing. He would not have testified for or on behalf unless Mr. Ellis can establish this relationship that would necessitate this witness testifying quote unquote for Mr. Boone. Game
No,
over.
I'll rewrite part of the question.
Okay, okay, objection sustained.
Just to clarify, if you called a game warden, did you have his phone programmed in your phone?
Yes,
So you was able just to go to Mr. Boone's number and be able to call him?
yes.
Okay, and my question was, had you ever testified in a case that Mr. Boone was handling in the past?
I've never testified in a court case. I've given a statement, but I've never actually been in court and testified.
And what would your statement have consisted of? What would you have given a statement?
It was an eyewitness statement.
And what was your eyewitness to?
An individual actually trespassing on another one of my friend's properties,
Not your family's property?
not my family property.
Did you and Mr. Boone ever talk other than about testifying on this particular case of someone else's property and someone trespassing on?
I guess I don't understand that.
All right, you had Mr. Boone's phone in your, the phone number in your phone.
Yeah.
Had you and Mr. Boone ever communicated other than about the, I forget what you called the case, but the case whereas on a friend's property?
Have we ever talked other than that other incident?
Yes.
Checking to see how, you've been doing and how the season was going.
So is it fair to say that if you had called Mr. Boone to see how he was doing, how things was going, things of that nature, is it fair to say that you and Mr. Boone had a friendship relationship?
I guess that could be fair. I don't know. I can't speak for him. I would say yes.
A relationship good enough that you could call him, knowing that he was not the game warden in his territory or his area, was not over the property where he was at on this day, on this instant. You felt comfortable calling him and giving him the name of somebody that may have been trespassing on your property.
Yeah, and I wanted to hand over the rifle as well.
Would you think that it would be more appropriate to call a friend game warden on this incident, or would it be more appropriate for you to call the game warden that is over that area and turn it in?
To be honest with you, I didn't even know the game warden over that area.
Okay, at what time did you find out who the game warden was that covered the area that we're talking about here today?
Probably last year when I ran into them and they were checking me when I was dove hunting one day.
Did you form a relationship with him?
I have his number saved in my phone.
So if this incident happened today, whenever you went home and you went out on your property on hunting, and you came in contact with somebody that walked up to you, told you his name, would you call your friend Mr. Boone, or would you call the game warden that you should call that's over that area?
I called the game warden who I should call because Mr. Boone's no longer a game warden,
But he wasn't over in the area,
but he was a game warden.
but he wasn't over the area that we're talking about this time.
That's correct. To be honest with you, I'm not even 100% sure the area that Mr. Boone was over.
Well,
I just knew that he was a game warden and I could give him a shout and he would more than likely answer my phone call.
do you feel like with your relationship with Mr. Boone that, you had a little bit of an edge by calling Mr. Boone because you knew him personally and that he would come and take care of that maybe a little more diligently because of your relationship with him?
Yeah.
How many other incidences have you had, or as you've called the game warden?
Objection, relevance, Judge.
Objection sustained.
As to, I'm a little confused, Judge, as to what question that he was objecting to. I hadn't finished my question at that point. And, but we had talked to some other, asked to some other things prior to that. My question that I was asking at the time that prosecutor objected to was how many instances has happened in the past where a game warden was called out there on their property. And
I think it was Mr. Boone was called, right?
Yeah, Mr. Boone was called.
Yeah, but I
My
mean,
objection would be any other instances that didn't involve this defendant is not relevant to today's proceeding.
that's
Judge,
sustained.
I think it is relevant to some degree in that the witness has testified that he had a personal relationship with Mr. Boone. And in this case, I think it's clear that Mr. Boone gave special treatment to a friend versus in the procedures that should have been followed, calling the game warden that was over that area versus him calling a friend to come out there and investigate this incident.
Mr. Coleman.
Who Mr. Phelan called had nothing to do with this, whether or not this defendant was on that property, had nothing to do with whether or not this defendant had consented on the property, has nothing to do with whether or not this defendant was hunting on that property.
If that be the case, Judge, if he had nothing to do with it, then he should have been called. If the game warden is his jurisdiction, if the game warden has a jurisdiction of area that he's to police and he's to take care of, and Mr. Phelan called a friend as someone that he has had an association with to the extent he had his number in his phone, to the extent that he calls and asks him how's he doing and things of that nature. I think it is relevant that there was preferential treatment in this case to the extent that Mr. Boone was the one that he called.
Briefly, if I could respond, Judge, I mean, I think there would be some merit to Mr. Ellis's argument had Mr. Boone actually responded to and made contact with the defendant that day. Again, I think it's irrelevant whether or not there was some relationship between.
Yes, he did. If it wasn't that specific day that he supposedly talked to Chase Ellis, as Mr. Boone has indicated, his report shows that he talked to someone that answered the name of Chase Ellis that day or the next day.
Let me ask you, so you're saying that the is irrelevant because it goes to the witness credibility or the Mr. Boone's credibility? What are you
I
saying?
think it's both, Judge. I think in this case that Mr. Phelan, because of his knowledge and his connection with Mr. Boone, that Mr. Boone came out there and investigated the case and in all reality, Judge, harassed Chase Ellis, who was not even the one that was there.
Oh, okay, well, yeah. Court is gonna sustain Mr. Coleman's objection.
I can just ask a number of follow-up questions.
Okay.
Mr. Phelan, to be clear, Patrick Phelan, who is he?
He's my great uncle.
All right, but he's a family member with just as much access to that property as you have, correct? And not unlike Patrick Phelan, you also have the right to either exclude or invite people on that property, correct?
Correct.
And And again, is it your testimony that you are unaware of anyone in your family, including Patrick Stephen, you, this defendant, consented on that property that day?
Sure.
The truck that the defendant utilized that day, was it parked in the easement or was it parked off of the easement?
It was parked at the entrance of the property, which, I guess can be defined as easement as well.
Nevertheless, this defendant would have had to, walk into your property to get to the easement, is that, or to get?
He had to cross the fence to get into the property.
And additionally, where you encountered him, it was in the tree line, right?
It was standing at the edge of the tree that I guess would be on the ditch line.
Now, there's been some questioning about, your identification of the defendant, as it relates to social media and your identification, of the defendant otherwise. I want to just be clear. Is your in-court identification of this defendant today based on your recollection of encountering him that day?
Yes, the person I saw that night,
The visual,
visually.
about 3 feet away, like we did, like we talked about.
Yes.
I also want to clear up, make sure the record is clear as to the location of this property. We've been referring to it as property that's located at Walden and Major, right?
Southwest border.
Southwest corner of Walden and Major Drive. Your friendship, or if any, with Game Warden Boone, would it have changed the fact in any way?
Your Honor, I'd object to saying if it wasn't relevant earlier when I was talking about Mr. Boone's relationship with him, it's not relevant at this point either.
Objection sustained.
Your attempt to contact Mr. Boone, did that change in any way the facts of this case? Meaning, you forming the opinion that this defendant was on that property hunting?
No, I contacted Mike then because I knew his number and I felt like he'd be the person to contact us. If he could put me in contact with the right person, or he could take care of it for me.
No further questions, so this witness judge.
Mr. Ellis?
Just a couple of weeks ago. Mr. Beal, what about the gate that was talking about, where the truck was parked at as you was leaving to meet your friend? And your friend was gonna pick you up at a different location than he let you out, is that correct?
No, the exact same location.
Okay, so he let you out, was that gate locked that day?
Yeah.
So, no one could drive down the edge of the canal or could get on the property?
You could, because I had the key to the gate, but I didn't have the gate open.
Am I correct in saying, or is it true that the way those gates are positioned, there's one on each side, there's two gates? Okay, and could someone just walk around the gate? Is there a space there in between the two
Yeah,
gates
someone can walk out. Yeah, someone can walk around the gate.
without a key?
Without a key, yeah. You can't drive around the gate without a key, but you can walk around it.
Is it your testimony today that you had purple paint or posted signs on that gate or on that fence the day of this incident?
I'm gonna be completely honest, I do not recall.
Did you ever go back out to that property and paint purple paint after that incident?
I have painted purple paint on most of our property parts now.
On that particular, now, is that after this incident to where,
I've done that within the last year, yes.
okay, so it's very possible that there was no purple paint indicating that you could not go on it, you could not trespass on it, or there was no posted signs at that point.
It's very possible, but it's also very possible that there was.
If if there is a Google image of that gate without purple paint or without posted signs, did you have any reason to disagree with that, image of that day that the Google image shows on that day, that gate, no purple paint, no posted signs? Would you have any reason to believe that's not true?
No, I'm not trying to argue that there was purple paint, not purple paint, no trespass signs. That's not what I'm trying to accomplish here. I mean, I'm just pointing out that I found a man on our property, have identified the man. He had no permission to be on the property. That's all I'm saying. If y'all have a picture that has no purple paint, I'm not saying that there is no purple paint or no trespassing sign. All I'm saying is I encountered a man, I identified him on the property. He had no permission to be on said property.
Have you ever killed any deer off of this property?
I have.
Objection. He's answering.
Are you, do you use social media, fairly good bit, or, just kind of getting a grasp of it? Myself, I don't even look at Facebook or any of those, so I'm just wondering, how often do you think you would get on social media?
Objection around this, Judge.
Just sustain.
Now, the witness has indicated that he knows Chase Ellis by social media. I think it's a fair question to find out how much he participates and how much he looks at social media.
What he's testified to is that he's in court identification of Mr. Ellis based on his face-to-face encounter with him, and that he used social media to confirm that. That's what I recall testimony.
Yeah. Objection sustained.
Yes, Your Honor, I have no further witnesses.
Just one follow-up question, if I could, Judge. Mr. Phelan, purple paint or no purple paint, is it fair to say that that gate that's there serves as notice that it is not open to, that property is not open to the public?
Yes.
No, I pass it over to you.
Do you know what purple paint is indicative of? What do you put purple paint on the?
It's no trespassing.
Okay, and you have no trespassing signs that can be posted also. But in this instance, you have two gates that has got a gap in between them. Someone could just walk through and walk around and be on the property without any knowledge that they're not supposed to.
Well, the gap in between the two gates is a ditch, a pretty deep ditch. It's not something that you would typically just choose to walk down and into and enter into a property.
I apologize. I thought you testified that you could walk around that gate and walk onto that property.
You do, but you have to actually walk down towards the edge, walk down towards inside the edge of the ditch.
Not big enough gap to drive a four-wheeler through.
No.
Pass the witness.
I have no further questions for Mr. Chief.
Okay. May this witness step down?
Yes.
May this witness be excused?
No, Judge. Say that's no further witnesses.
Okay.
Just a second.
Okay.
The state would rest at this time, Judge.
Okay, now, the rule has been invoked. Is that correct?
Yeah.
The witness right here, he's gonna have to,
Well, he's an exception to the rule.
Okay.
My understanding of the rule is that an essential party to the case can remain in the courtroom. He's-
okay,
He's certainly an essential party,
okay.
in my opinion.
And Mr. Ellis,
Your Honor, is he going to be able to testify?
gonna be rebuttal witness?
Well, even so, Judge, my understanding of the rule is that an essential party can still remain in the courtroom. A litigant, a victim, a person, and I've never said I'm an expert at the law or memorize the entire code, but my understanding is that an essential party to the litigation is an exception to the rule.
Your Honor, I don't think that a person, a central party or so can stay in the courtroom and then be able to be called as a witness, called back to testify. That's the whole point of invoking the rule, is so the person could not stay in here, listen to the evidence, and then come back and testify.
Judge, I've actually had to write a trial brief on this before, and my understanding of the law is that a central party can be present during, in all phases of the trial. Judge,
I mean, I'm gonna have him, just ask him to stand out in the hall. You have a witness that's gonna come up?
Judge, for the purposes of the record, I object. Again, my
Okay.
objection is that this witness is an essential party who is an exception to the rule, and that he is allowed to be in the courtroom in all phases of the trial.
Okay, well, we're gonna ask him to, just have a stand in the hall.
And not to be,
I mean-
but there's a point for that exception, again, because I briefed it.
Okay, do you have, your
If you give
statute?
me time, I can pull it up.
Okay,
But,
you had a time.
okay, but here's the reason behind that, because again, because I've done the research. Because I need to be able to confer in real time with that essential party as that person is testifying, so that I can be able to properly,
Okay.
redirect or cross-examine that witness. That's why that exception is in the rule.
Okay, just pull up the rule, and then we'll argue, we're gonna do what the rule says. Okay,
Yes.
Your Honor, can we take a short recess or?
we can, I have, some others, jury that's out there need to talk to. At this time, we'll take a short recess.